The story Rome tells about itself begins not with marble or law, but with mud on bare feet and the smell of river reeds drying in the sun. Before there was a republic, before there were senators arguing beneath painted ceilings, there was a low hill beside the Tiber where shepherds watched their flocks and listened for wolves at night. The river moved slowly then, brown and wide, flooding in spring, shrinking in summer, a border and a promise at the same time. Rome was not yet inevitable. It was fragile, uncertain, and deeply human. The Romans later said their city was born of blood and destiny. They spoke of Romulus, suckled by a wolf, raised among herdsmen, a man who killed his own brother to mark a boundary in the dirt. Whether Romulus lived as flesh and bone or only as memory hardened into myth mattered less than what his story taught, that Rome was built through violence, choice, and an unshakable belief that boundaries, once drawn, must be defended. Even in the Republic, centuries later, senators would invoke his name as if he were still watching from the hills, measuring whether Rome remained worthy of its beginning. In the centuries after Romulus, kings ruled Rome. They were not tyrants in the later Greek sense, but warrior judges, men who led armies, presided over rituals, and sat in judgment when disputes rose from the streets. Around them stood elders, the patres, heads of old families who advised, argued, and remembered. This council of elders, the early Senate, did not yet command the state, but it learned the habit of speaking for Rome. Habits, once learned, have a way of surviving revolutions. By the late 6th century BCE, Rome had grown restless under kings. The city had expanded beyond its original hills. Market stalls crowded the forum, where mud was slowly replaced with stone. Traders from Etruria brought bronze mirrors and rituals read from animal livers. Greek pottery arrived by sea, painted with gods who looked disturbingly human. Rome absorbed everything, including resentment. Power was concentrating in the hands of kings who ruled longer, judged more harshly, and listened less. The last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, would later be remembered not just as arrogant, but as a warning. His reign tightened Rome like a clenched fist. He ignored the Senate, relied on personal allies, and demanded obedience rather than consent. But it was not policy that ended the monarchy. It was a crime committed in silence. The story centers on Lucretia, a noblewoman whose virtue was praised in a culture obsessed with honor. When she was violated by Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, her response shocked Rome. She summoned her husband and father, told them what had happened, and then took her own life. The blade fell, blood spread across the floor, and with it fell the idea that kings could be endured. Personal shame became public revolution. Lucius Junius Brutus, kin to the royal house, yet sworn enemy to its tyranny, lifted Lucretia's body and called the people to witness. His voice carried through the forum, sharp with grief and resolve. Rome, he said, would never again be ruled by kings. The word rex became poison. Crowds murmured, fists tightened. Old soldiers remembered slights they had swallowed for years. The Tarquins fled. In 509 BCE, Rome crossed a line it would never step back over. The Republic was born not in celebration, but in fear. Romans knew what they had destroyed, but not yet what they had built. Power was split deliberately, nervously. Instead of one king, there would be two consuls elected each year, each able to block the other. Authority would be temporary, shared, and watched. The Senate gained weight, becoming the place where experience mattered, where old men spoke of precedent and survival. Rome trusted no single voice anymore. Daily life reflected this new caution. In the Forum, citizens gathered not just to trade, but to listen. Elections were loud, chaotic affairs. Men in warm togas argued openly, calling out names, recounting military service, family loyalty, debts repaid. There was no secret ballot yet. Choice was public, and so was pressure. The Republic demanded participation, but it also demanded conformity. Yet this early republic was not a democracy. Power belonged to the patricians, families who claimed ancient lineage and exclusive access to priesthoods and offices. The plebeians, farmers, craftsmen, laborers, carried shields in war and burdens in peace. When Rome called, they marched. When Rome taxed, they paid. But when Rome governed, they were expected to listen. Tensions simmered. In narrow streets, men spoke quietly of unfair laws and crushing debts. A farmer who lost his land to war and interest could be enslaved for what he owed. The republic that promised freedom from kings seemed happy to tolerate bondage among its own. In 494 BCE, the pressure broke. The plebeians withdrew from the city, leaving Rome eerily silent, workshops empty, fields untended. It was not violence, but absence that frightened the elite. The result was compromise. The office of the tribune of the plebs was created, men sworn to protect the common people. Their bodies were declared sacred. To harm them was to invite the gods' wrath. For the first time, resistance was written into the system. Rome did not resolve conflict by erasing difference. It contained it, formalized it, and learned to live with constant internal strain. While Rome wrestled with itself, the wider world moved in parallel rhythms. Across the sea, Greek city-states were experimenting with their own forms of rule. Athens had expelled its tyrants and was tentatively placing power in the hands of citizens, debating laws in open assemblies. Sparta balanced kingship with councils and rigid discipline. Greeks argued endlessly about freedom, virtue, and the ideal state, their ideas traveling with merchants and mercenaries. Rome listened, adapted, but never copied outright. Greek freedom was talkative, philosophical. Roman freedom would be legalistic, disciplined, and relentlessly practical. To the south and west, Carthage rose quietly on trade winds. Founded by Phoenician settlers, it was a city of harbors and ledgers, its power measured in ships and silver rather than speeches. Carthaginian merchants sailed past Italy, carrying tin, dye, grain, and stories of distant coasts. Early treaties between Rome and Carthage show a cautious respect, borders drawn not on land but on water. Neither yet imagined how completely they would one day define each other. Back in Italy, Rome's neighbors tested the young republic. Latin towns shifted alliances. Etruscan kings eyed their former possession. Each war sharpened Roman habits. Citizen soldiers returned from campaigns with dust still in their hair, listening as magistrates explained why sacrifice had been necessary. Victory did not bring rest, it brought expectation. Rome learned early that survival required expansion, and expansion required unity, however fragile. In quiet moments, senators walked the edges of the Forum at dusk, sandals scraping stone, discussing omens and laws. They worried not just about enemies beyond the walls, but about the balance within. Too much concession might weaken authority. Too much rigidity might provoke revolt. The Republic was a living thing, breathing through compromise and confrontation. The memory of kings lingered like a shadow. Any man who seemed too powerful was watched, whispered about, sometimes accused. Ambition became suspect, yet ambition drove Rome forward. This contradiction would never be resolved. It would define Roman history as surely as any battle. By the early 5th century BCE, Rome stood changed but unfinished. It had traded the certainty of monarchy for the tension of shared rule. It had learned to turn internal conflict into structure, disagreement into office and law. It was still small by later standards, vulnerable, uncertain of its destiny, but it had discovered something rare, a political identity strong enough to survive its own doubts. As night fell over the Tiber, lamps flickered in modest homes and grand atriums alike. Children learned stories of Romulus and Brutus, of wolves and oaths, of a city that refused to kneel to one man. They did not yet know how far Rome would go or how much it would cost. The Republic had been born, but it had not yet been tested by disaster, invasion, and the hard question of whether liberty could endure fear. That test was coming. Beyond Rome's fields, enemies gathered, debts mounted, and the fragile balance between rich and poor trembled. In the next chapter of Rome's life, the Republic would face its first great crisis, one that would reveal whether this new system was a brief experiment or the foundation of an empire yet unimagined.